Hi, Laura here, and I am here with a video for L6M1. What I thought I'd do this time was to do some exam analysis looking at past questions and what may come up on your exam. I just want to start with a caveat that I got this information from principal marker reports and speaking to students. Now, the latest series, the last couple of principal marker reports that CIPS have released, are essentially completely difficult to tell what the topic was. We know what the overall learning objective was, but it's hard to drill in and it's very, very vague. So some of these will be vaguer than others, so just do bear with me here. And what we're going to do is drill into each and every learning objective here. Just a caveat as well, remember that they can ask you anything that the learning outcomes are. So anything based on the learning outcomes in your exam. So this could be a repeat from last time or not. Do learn everything. This is just there to give you a little bit of comfort. So let's drill into learning objective 1. We've got 2 learning objectives or learning outcomes, should I say, from learning objective 1, which is critically evaluate the differences between leadership and management and critically analyze approaches to leadership for improving procurement and supply chain management. So let's see what's come up here. July 23 was leadership theory linked to a case. Again, as I said, very vague. We're not sure what that theory was. Leadership skills came up May and March 23. Transformational leadership, autocratic leadership, effective leadership for May 22. Again, a little bit vague. Leadership styles were March 22 and November 21. We have a case study for that one. March 21 was action-centered leadership. We've got leadership styles coming up again in Jan 21, September 20, contingency theories in July, and then leadership styles again in Jan 20. So let's look at the analysis of this. Okay, so you can see that we've got questions asked in both 1.1 and 1.2. 1.1 focuses on transformational leadership, which came up once, and leadership skills, which came up 3 times. In 1.2, we have leadership styles, which came up 6 times. Autocratic leadership once, contingency theories once, and action-centered leadership once. So there is more of a focus on 1.2, but that's not to say that that will be the case on your actual exam. Learning objective 2. So here we have 3 learning outcomes: influencing styles, leadership techniques to influence personnel in the supply chain, and a communication plan to influence personnel in the supply chain. So remember, you can feel free to take a picture, stop the recording and write these down. If you are a student at Business Academy Online, you will have a copy of this, whether you're on a Ruby or Diamond package, in the revision section of our virtual learning system. So learning objective 2 is looking at the ways in which leaders can adapt. Again, quite vague. May 23, influencing. March 23, influencing tactics came up. Influencing styles came up in November 22. So again, a lot of repetition here. Measuring effective leadership was July 22. Stakeholders, management by objectives, and cross-functional leadership styles, i.e. managing in 4 directions, came up for the rest of that year up to November 21. March 21, communication plan, implementing change, emotional intelligence, that managing in 4 directions again, and stakeholders came up Jan 20. So if we look at that in terms of the focus areas, you can see that managing in 4 directions and influencing came up 3 and 2 times in 2.1. Management by objectives and emotional intelligence came up once in 2.2, whereas measuring effective leadership came up twice. And in 2.3, we've got the communication plan coming up just once and stakeholders coming up twice. Again, this kind of drills into those different areas. Learning objective 3. You can see here that we have 4 learning outcomes here. So there's a lot more that they could potentially ask you on. Contrasting the sources of powers and how to overcome it. Analysing equality and diversity issues. Change management and conflict are the major learning outcomes here. And that's reflected, as you would expect, in the questions. Again, we've got July and May and March are very vague. They just say leadership challenges. We don't know what those are. So that could be anything that we just mentioned in those learning outcomes, which is a little bit frustrating, but that's what we've got to go with. November 22, resistance to change. July 22, we had a question about control and order. May 22 was the informal organisation. March 22 was power, and November 21 was conflict resolution. Diversity came up in March 21, resistance to change 21, Jan 21, plan change came up in September 20, conflict resolution again in July 20, and gender and equality issues came up in Jan 20. And so again, if we kind of map these against the learning outcomes, control and order versus flexibility came up once, that's part of 3.1, as did power. Diversity and equality both came up once in 3.2. In 3.3, all about change, we had 2 resistance to change questions and 1 planned change question. And in 3.4, we had 2 conflict questions and 1 about the informal organisation. So that's Learn Objective 3. Learn Objective 4 now. We only have 2 learning outcomes here, and that's examining ethical practices and standards that apply to global supply chains. And 4.2, which is assessing regulations that impact on the ethical employment of people. So again, we've got some vagueness. Ethical standards and regs, we think, is what came up on July 23. Ethical practices for procurement came up in May. Law and regulations and employment was part of March 23. Ethical supply chain diligence, November 22. Audit findings, scenarios and ethics. So we're still staying on that 4.1 ethics side of it. Ethical standards, ethical codes of conduct for March 22. November 21, we had dismissal. Then we have that again in March 21 for legislation on redundancy and dismissal. Health and safety came up in Jan 21. Ethical supply chain diligence again in September 20. And then ethical standards came up in both July and Jan 20. So if we look at that as the focus areas, we've got 5 ethical standards and regulations questions. So it's very, very popular. And then we've got 4 ethical practices. So you can see that the majority of questions have actually been asked on 4.1. That's not to say that you won't get questions on 4.2 in your exam, but you can see here that employment regs, dismissal, and health and safety regulations have been asked once themselves. So please make sure that you look at all of the learning outcomes and have notes against each one of those bullet points. I hope you found that useful. Very best of luck in your exam, and I'll catch you back for another video soon. Bye for now.